Good morning, Val. It's a pleasure to see you again. And for those listening, I think we've what is this, our fourth or fifth take on this, trying to get this going. So we have today Val Dahiya, partner at Perkins Coie, lawyer by training, ex-regulator as well. And I know we'll have a lot of fun talking about our days in the regulatory side of the business. But first of all, just wanted to welcome you to Compliance Over Coffee, where we elevate voices from around the industry who work in, on, around the three different lines of fence. So first of all, welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself, background and role at Perkins Coie.
Thanks, Brian. So, as you said, I definitely have a regulatory background. The majority of my career has been spent on the regulatory side of the securities market. I started out at the SEC interning and then went on to FINRA, where I did oversight of broker dealers, and then moved on to the SEC, where I started off examining broker dealers and duly registered broker dealers and investment advisors, and then moved on to the Division of Trading and Markets, really focusing on the rules that are applicable to broker dealers, exchanges, transfer agents, and clearing agencies. And now in my private practice life, I have stuck with, I would say, at least a good percentage of my practice is still that traditional 34 Act compliance kind of practice, where whether it's from representing broker dealers or investment advisors with SEC examinations, or broker dealers with FINRA examinations, just routine compliance questions, questions about how to implement new technology to create efficiencies in their system, or leveraging technology to offer different asset classes and what that means, and the different rules and regulations around that, whether it's from customer protection type issues and sales practice issues, to the due diligence required by by the broker dealers as gatekeepers to the markets. So it pretty much spans the scope. I also do quite a bit of work in the blockchain distributed ledger technology space. Oftentimes people are trying to understand how something might cross over into the securities world, and they're finding that it's relatively easy to do so, especially if you're fundraising. Um, or making promises to people
Right.
in anticipation of receiving some type of investment. So that pretty much covers my my practice area. It's pretty broad.
Yeah. Well, and for an 87-year-old law, right, a lot is being impacted by it these days, probably uncontemplated, I'd imagine, uh, and creating a lot of questions. So, well, I know we'll have some fun talking about some of that today. Want to
Right.
dive in? Ooh, and we got the mug. I actually have to ask, what's in the mug? What's the favorite coffee that's in there?
It's a latte.
A latte.
What
Okay.
about yours?
I've got some green ginger hot tea. So,
Love it. Love it. You are
right,
definitely more on the healthier side of the fence.
just trying to stay warm with the weather here in Chicago.
Fair
Um,
enough.
yeah. So let's dive in. I love that we have similar regulatory backgrounds. Obviously, you on the government side, I was on the SRO side, and obviously worked at a very high level with a number of industry partners, and
Mhm.
would like to just hear a little bit about. We've had some opportunity to speak to other folks in a supervisory role. Um, how are regulators evolving, and where do you think that their focus is currently? Where do you think regulatory bodies are headed? And then secondly, what do you wish they knew about the companies they regulate?
You know, regulation, I'll speak in the context of securities regulation.
Mhm.
And I think there's a significant amount of focus on retail investors and the perceptions of a gamification of of trading, and the concerns around, do investors really understand what they're purchasing, the implications of what they're purchasing, and how, like, just fundamental market structure, how it works, and then Reg BI is the reg best interest, broker dealers being required to put the best interest of their customers. And it's difficult because when you're operating a business, you are operating real time. And whereas regulators have the benefit of hindsight. And so it's really, really thinking through both the immediate risk and concerns and the business concerns around that with, pressure to launch, but also being able to look 6 months, a year, 18 months
Mhm.
down the road and appreciate that somebody is going to come in and look at what you did and have the benefit of, one, they're the regulator, and
Mhm.
two, if there's any customer complaints, if there are, notices to members about certain types of products. So I think that there's going to be a significant amount of attention being paid to the types of products that are being sold,
Mhm.
the risk disclosures around those products, even the ESG, so like environmental,
Mhm.
social governance concepts, and the whether or not the disclosures are accurate, whether they're fulsome, whether they're accurate, and whether they give or provide potential investors sufficient information to make wise investment decisions. So I think that complex products is going to continue to be something that is a focal point. Reg BI will continue to be a focal point. And I also think kind of attenuated from that, technology will be a focal point. How is the industry modernizing, and are they doing the appropriate due diligence? What does modernizing look like? Not just modernizing the assets, but modernizing the basic fundamental market infrastructure, and what that means. So I definitely expect that that would be top of book, especially if and when the Senate confirms Gary Gensler as chair for
Mhm.
the SEC. Um, oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I think you're bringing up an excellent point, right? As we quantify, as we digitalize all these different asset types and we kind of interpolate them into digital currencies or different tradable assets, it really is changing the nature of market regulation. It is changing the nature of what has been contemplated to be the regulatory purview by these agencies previously, where they're almost holistic conduct regulators at this point, rather than kind of registration-based firewalls. And you mentioned Gary Gensler, obviously pending confirmation. He was a teacher, I believe, at MIT in distributed ledger DLT. What does that mean? Like, what's that going to do in the market as the regulators move forward? How is it going to change how they regulate?
You know, I would think that there will be a significant amount of focus on industry driven technological solutions to modernize. Thanks to COVID, I think, whereas modernization or technology solutions to create efficiencies may on the list of things to do, the priority list, it may have been, number 10 or even further down on the priority list. But as a result of COVID and the the forced remote working environment, it's really pushed technological innovations to the top, like their top of book for many primary market participants. And so focusing on the due diligence process when if you're outsourcing or if you're coming up with an enterprise solution, ensuring that business continuity planning, capacity resiliency. We've seen some instances of this in the past few months where broker dealer platforms have gone down, and questions around whether or not their systems had the capacity to really facilitate the volume of transactions without disruptions. And so that is definitely, especially with Gensler, I would imagine that looking at distributed ledger technology as a means to potentially modernize our securities infrastructure. DTCC is working on, they have their Project Ion and Project Whitney, and so many other market participants are quietly really testing the technology and figuring out, how can it be used to create efficiencies in our system and potentially eliminate some of the friction points and some of the necessary intermediaries. And I think, even the regulators are looking at this type of technology to leverage to create more transparency real time into transactions and who's behind those transactions. And it kind of goes counter to the whole blockchain movement with decentralization, anonymizing transactions. And I think that those two things are just going to come to a head: the technology innovation side of the industries, and then those highly regulated financial services intermediaries, along with the government regulators for that industry. It's going to come to a head. And we both know, we've been around long enough to know, the weight is going to come out on the side of transparency and disclosure. FinCEN is going to want to know who is behind. Like, they're going to be worried about anti-money laundering and worried about potential financing of terrorist activities, or some other nefarious conduct. So transparency will still be key. So I think that's what I think regulators are looking at it. How can they leverage the technology to create more transparency from a compliance perspective and a surveillance monitoring and surveillance perspective? Intermediaries looking at it for ways to create efficiencies. And then also, I feel like, from what I've seen, at least personally, a lot of the asset evolution is coming from the startup kind of market and not from the traditional, regulated intermediaries. I haven't seen as much of a push for new asset classes, but I have seen, the the concept of using distributed ledger technology and tokens to create efficiencies in, for instance, cross-border payments,
Mhm.
where we know there's a lot of friction.
Yeah, the actual application of blockchain where it can facilitate those payments, right, as opposed to creating new currencies. It is interesting to think about what the goal of disintermediation was. Was it to disrupt large players, or was it to escape regulation? And you're really not going to ever get away from that second point, right? And that, obviously something that we're very familiar with. And I wanted to touch on an area that, since we actually I think had attempt number 4, and now we're on attempt number 5, like we said, has really kind of hit the news wire in a very strong way, and that's NFTs, non-fungible tokens, in particular around the art world. These bespoke assets that are one of a kind, and we've always heard something has the value prescribed based on what someone's willing to pay for it. Of course, what is the market willing to pay for it? But this is a whole new frontier that's already in a new frontier. So
Yes.
interested in your take, how you look at these just initial reactions, since this is days old at this point.
I think there needs to be, for anyone considering issuing a non-fungible token, making sure they work with highly competent counsel that can, that's well versed in identifying regulatory issues, whether it's money transmission law, whether it's securities or commodities. But a lot of these assets do, in fact, have the indicia of securities. And it really comes down to, how are they being marketed and how are they being sold? Is the issuer, are they keeping some type of, are they putting in these smart contracts the ability to see, gain commissions in the secondary trading of these assets? What are the expectations of the person that's purchasing? Are these really unique? The token itself is unique, but is there something that really differentiates one item from another? Or does it just look like, someone attempting to do indirectly what they couldn't do directly? Is it more of a play off of the ICOs,
Mhm.
just with arguably art. And some of them definitely, probably are fine. But you definitely need to consider the regulatory framework and the analysis, because innovation moves at the speed of light,
Mhm.
and regulation, it's responsive, it's reactive. It oftentimes moves at the speed of a sloth, and you're a year in and you find out that you've got multi-million dollar, if not billion dollars worth of exposure, and that your ecosystem or what you've issued, you're looking at rescission rights, you're looking at, I mean, there are a host of
Mhm.
issues, if you don't structure it right and follow through. And so we've seen a lot of interest in this area. I think also the concerns about anti-money laundering come up, especially when you see these digital clips of artwork or whatnot
Mhm.
going for
Sure.
exorbitant amounts of money. And
Makes you
so
wonder, huh?
I think a lot of people at the federal government are like, But you know the saying, follow the money.
That's right. Well, to your point earlier, right, there's three different ways to regulate, right? You can show transparency, you can regulate it, or you can ban it. And increasingly, we've seen regulators pull back. They don't want to ban things, right? This isn't onion futures anymore, and move
Right.
towards, back in the day, and move
Right.
towards a more permissive kind of regime. But and the other side of that being a year later with that permanent information, they can bring a punitive action of that kind. So how do you balance that kind of long tail of risk that increases over time based on customer harm that you may not be aware of day one? And I think to your point, you're talking about really making sure folks understand exactly what those rules are, what those regulations, what those issues that could crop up, and protect against those. Those are going to be the people who are protected.
Mhm.
And I kind of want to dig in there for a moment. So, how do you see these regimes impacting, NFTs, other new products, other new assets? What are the risks that compliance and risk people, to the extent these firms have one, should be aware of when engaging in this sort of conduct?
So generally, if you're dealing with, like in our traditional space with financial service, like regulated financial services
Mhm.
entities, they already know what to look for. They know, and so few broker dealers have the ability to transact in
Mhm.
digital assets, especially non-securities related digital assets. I would think that, they already have the appropriate controls in place. And to the extent that they are thinking about going down that path, then working with their inside counsel, working with their outside counsel, and also leveraging those communications with FINRA and the SEC to make sure that your regulator, your primary regulator, that you have buy-in and that you're documenting that, um, and doing that on the front end, not the
Mhm.
back end, once you've been examined or you're
Mhm.
the target of an investigation.
Mhm.
For the crypto exchanges, so there it's the same concept, just on
Mhm.
the other end of the spectrum. They should have appropriate diligence programs to ensure that anything that they are listing or transacting in is not a
Mhm.
security, um, because that opens them up to a substantial amount of exposure for operating an
Mhm.
unregistered exchange.
Mhm.
So I think it's the same concept. You're just
Mhm.
looking at it from different angles. Um, and key to this is the issuers. The issuers,
Mhm.
I think what we've seen, over the past 3 years, it's been the issuers that have really taken the brunt of the hit
Mhm.
with the rescission rights, with the, cease and desist orders, with the SEC filing lawsuits, not only against the entities, but also against the individuals. Um, and it's really difficult where for issuers, if someone is considering issuing an NFT or any type of crypto asset, they need to go to competent counsel. And I mean
Mhm.
regulatory counsel who has substantive experience in the security space, the commodity space, the money transmission
Mhm.
space, um, because those are the primary areas they hit on. But with NFTs, where you're dealing with art, then you also have to worry about intellectual property. whose
Mhm.
property is this? When you're thinking about, are you taking something that truly belongs to someone else? And if you are the artist that is issuing it, how do you protect? Are you selling the actual rights to that art? Like if I bought a Van Gogh, which will never happen because I will never have that kind of money. But if I bought a Van Gogh, you know, it's mine, legal title passes to me, and then I can loan it out and make money from loaning it out, or I can put it in my private collection and just look at it. But generally, once an artist has sold outside of like music, digital content, and movies, once an artist has sold their art, usually you don't have that trail. You don't have that concept of royalties. And this is opening a new frontier for people in the technology space to potentially receive royalties. And royalties oftentimes can actually be commissions, depending on the facts and
Mhm.
circumstances. So really understanding where those lines are, but are you crossing the line into an investment contract because you do have this commission based, you've created a common enterprise, there's been an exchange of value, and now the person who purchased, they purchase with the expectation, a reasonable expectation of a profit, because they're like, oh, you've helped create a secondary market for this, and
Mhm.
all of the issues that come up with
Mhm.
crypto assets.
Yeah. It's certainly an interesting paradigm shift because the laws, the words that were written dozens of years ago are now being used to apply to modern issues. And the definition of those words hasn't changed. And so you have to wonder if not only is the market evolving, but the laws and regulations need to evolve as well, right? To more poignantly address these new digital services and keep us competitive in that broader market for these new ideas, new technologies. And I think in that vein, I want to do some quick hits because we got a couple minutes left. So
Okay.
I got three or four that want to attack here. And that first is on that, which is regulatory developments. What should people be aware of in 2021 as the Biden administration increasingly ramps up?
I think you're going to see more regulation. Not in a negative way. I just think you're going to see a more of an appetite to be affirmative and to provide guidance and to address things up front. Do, what bucket does it fall in? Issue guidance so that people are aware of what they're dealing with. And I do think that the innovation is going to be, that's not going away. That's something that will continue to be a focus, and really understanding the innovation and the people who are providing the technology services.
Mhm. Great. So follow up, what is the number one challenge facing regulatory compliance as an industry, right? Following the rules, not just from the tech provider side, but the market for risk and compliance in general.
I think it comes down to, things are changing so swiftly, and the traditional ways of making money have changed as well. We see zero commissions. What does that mean? The SEC is going to be paying a substantial amount of attention to retail facing broker dealers that
Mhm.
tout zero commissions, but on the back end, they're receiving order for payment for order flow.
Mhm.
So I think that as the industry adjusts to, trying to get more retail investors,
Mhm.
that there will be that unintended consequence of a substantial regulatory response to that. Um, and that's something that is happening now, and I expect to see it continue through 2021.
Great. All right, last question. I'm going to give you three topics and answer, and looking for an answer on how much attention they're going to get from a regulatory standpoint,
Okay.
low, medium, or high. Social issues in regulation like ESG,
Hi.
regulation. Okay, high. All right, we got one down.
Yep.
Regulation creeping into other verticals like social media.
Oh, very high.
Very high. Okay. And
Very,
then
very high.
Gamification of trading and market manipulation.
Very high.
Okay.
Because
So a
and all of
lot.
those things are, and the latter two are
Mhm,
intertwined, right?
mhm,
We've seen in the past, I want to say in the past like 2 months, I've seen the SEC exercise its ability to halt trading in a number of securities, and they're doing it affirmatively based on what's happening on social media and seeing the movements in those over-the-counter securities. So
right,
that is high, and how social media, whether or not someone can be charged with, say, a short squeeze, when you
mhm,
have these disparate individuals that aren't necessarily, they may not even know each other, but putting pressure on certain stock because
mhm,
and articulating that they want to drive up the price because they want to screw over the street. So
mhm,
how will regulators respond to
yeah.
the intricacies of social media and how it allows all of these disparate players to come
Mhm.
together to act as a group?
It really gets to the heart of what is intent. How do we measure intent in a communication marketplace
Oh
where
yeah.
there's no transaction cost? So lots of questions to answer.
And about
Wonderful.
privacy, but privacy as well. I mean, should you
Mhm,
put that in writing? I mean, just common sense, and it goes to our regulated intermediaries as well. How are
mhm.
registered reps using social media? What type of content are they putting out there? And how do you monitor and surveil for that content, right?
Information is permanent these days, right?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, any parting thoughts before we close?
No, I think that, regulation will continue to expand. The interpretations will become more and more creative,
Mhm.
and the innovative side and the technology side will continue to respond in kind.
That's right. Well, always a pleasure, Val. We hit on NFTs, ESG, the new administration, blockchain, broker dealers, regulatory changes. I think we got through a lot of it. So
Yeah,
always a pleasure
exactly.
to speak, and thank you for the time. And stay tuned. We always are planning another great installment of Compliance Over Coffee. Thanks,
Well,
Val.
I look forward to our paths crossing when we're no longer forced to remote.
When we aren't our own digital NFTs in a way, right? When one day we'll
Exactly.
get back out into that world.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Stay well. Great to see you.
You too. Thanks,
All right.
Val. Take
All
care.
right. Bye bye.